I'm very excited to bring you today's episode with Bruce Pardy. Bruce is a law professor at Queen's University, and he came on my radar during the COVID show. He was calling out a lot of the infringements of rights that were going on there, and he became an outspoken critic of the government and has been so for a long time, actually. I would say Bruce's ideas are fairly libertarian, very based in free market principles. And we have a good time in this conversation. And this is some ideas. That's all these are. This is an idea. He's got a framework of a fantastic constitution that could be replicated anywhere and adapted to any situation. But some things that he has in this are incredible regarding how we limit government, how we create incentives so that the government doesn't become a crony plutocracy as it is right now. He's got ideas. One of the ideas he has in here, which I think is the best, is this idea of amateur government, where there are term limits that make it so you cannot be in or around or even as a consultant in government. So you can't have this revolving door where one year you're a consultant, and another year you're in office, and then another year you're a judge, and so on and so forth. He proposes that you can only spend a total of 6 years in government total, whether you're a consultant for government or around government as a judge and whatnot. He's got some really cool ideas in here too about how we limit the power of the courts by putting 2 judges in. And there's a lot of really great ideas in here. Before we jump into the interview, I just want to note that I had a little problem with my audio, so forgive me for that. You'll notice that there's some times where I sound really quiet, but Bruce's audio is great, so you'll be able to hear everything he says perfectly. I kind of waver in and out. I was having an issue with my microphone, so my apologies for that. But enjoy this interview and leave questions and comments below. I want to keep this conversation going. I'm looking for solutions. I want to hear what you have to say. And don't take this as dogma. This isn't just presented to say this is the way it ought to be. This is an idea. This is a growing conversation that I think needs to be had in this country and around the world. So enjoy the interview. Thanks for joining me here, Bruce. I have been a long admirer of your work, and I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Oh, thank you, Curtis, for having me. Great to talk to you.
Yeah, I came across your work regarding this Constitution, and we're in such an interesting time, aren't we? Where we've got the indigenous or the Aboriginal land claims happening. There's a lot of chaos in Canada as per, going back to COVID, the trucker rally, and I saw a commentary from you regarding all those things, and so thanks for being a truth teller during all of it. But this Constitution that you've written is, for a guy like myself, who I said to you earlier, I consider myself philosophically an anarchist, but sort of practically a statist. Your Constitution is perfect for that because it is even more libertarian than the American Constitution, from what I've seen. So I would love to just jump into some of it.
Sure. Yeah.
Maybe to start things off, why don't you give us your kind of take on the state of Canada today and why a Constitution like this is so important?
Right. Great. Sure. So, as your viewers will know, Canada has a lot of problems, but at the center of them is the managerial state. We are now in a system of governance that is statist to its core, meaning that those who have authority, have state authority, think it is their job to manage the country, to manage the economy, to manage the people, to manage your speech, to manage your thinking, to manage your ideology, and so on and so forth. There are not very many things that you can now do that does not require, some kind of government approval. Whether it's, raising and selling eggs, or building a shed on your land, or educating your children, or speaking your mind online, and so on and so forth. We live now in an area of managerialism, and this is at all levels of government. And we're talking federal, provincial, municipal, local, school boards, as the case may be. And in order for us to out from under the thumb of those who rule over us with state authority, we're going to have to imagine first a different way of thinking about governing the country. Now, country might be Canada, country might be Alberta, but first we have to deal with it in the abstract. What other ways are there to govern a country so that the people are actually free? And the starting point for me is not to, when you're trying to reimagine, reconceive a constitution. And this is it's a terrific moment, right? Because you have the potential for Alberta independence. And that moment gives you an opportunity to do all this thinking. Like, all right, so if you have a new country, how do you want to govern it so that the people are actually free? Now, here's the thing I would not do. To start with what we have and consider how to change it or how to cut it back. Because if you do that, you're starting with the same architecture. Exactly. Or if you like, here's another metaphor. Let's say you run a government and you've got a deficit and you think, oh, well, we're going to have to slash the budget, right? We need serious slashing of the budget. How are we going to reduce the amount of money that we spend? Okay, then the way not to go about it is to take the budget that you have and think, all right, what can we cut? Because all the things are going to look important and essential. And just the same thing will happen if with your constitution. You take the constitution that you have, which you're used to, you're comfortable with, and you think, all right, if we have an overbearing managerial state, how can we cut it back? Okay, for my money, that is the wrong way to go about it.
Well, and the problem with that too is there's a million advocacy groups for every single sector of government that are going to get up and call you Adolf Hitler for wanting to cause attrition, right?
Right. And that is exactly why we're in the problem that we are in, because there are so many interests that are wedded to having the state not only the size that it is, but bigger. Right? This has been a gradual evolutionary process. We began with a smaller government than we have, many decades and centuries ago. And it has grown incrementally, but steadily. And it never really goes in the other direction. It always only grows. And that's because you have a lot of people who are interested, self-interested in building their own little fiefdoms inside this machinery of government.
A system,
right? So
in a way, only ratchets up. It
only
ever gets bigger. It never goes back, because every step you take, now there's all this self-interest that comes into it. It's sort of what Rothbard and Friedman and and Hayek, all these guys were talking about, the foundational problem with the state.
Exactly so, 100%. And so, in order to do this project properly, I think you have to start with nothing. So start with a clean table, a blank slate, and say, all right, in order for the people of this country to be free, what is the minimum we require to achieve that state? Right? And so the anarchists might say, well, you don't need a state at all, because anarchy is true freedom. Anarchy means that nobody is imposing rules upon you, and that's freedom, and therefore we'll go with that. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a great thought, and philosophically, it's kind of attractive, but practically the problem is this, and I suspect you will agree with this. Practically, that means that you are subject to the force of other people.
Yeah, because because you can't have any control over a general consensus. So people can act irrationally, but you also have people who demand the state. That is correct. Problem, and this is where the whole problem comes up, where when a government becomes too free, or if it becomes too free, and too many people come in that want free stuff, they demand more from the state, and thus the ratcheting up goes.
Right. Now, so I sometimes put it this way: if you have anarchy, then what you have is a governance vacuum. in a sort of a free for all. It might make right situation, and what is bound to happen sooner or later is that somebody with might, with the biggest guns or the most people, will move in and decide that they're going to be the state, and so you end up in the same situation that we're in now, or worse.
Yeah.
Under the thumb of some kind of a strongman. So you don't want that. So let's start with this. What does it mean to be free? And I think we have to get our heads around that question in order to know what it is we're trying to achieve.
And it's pretty much goes to Article 1 of is that we're free from coercion, essentially.
Exactly so. Yeah. Exactly so. And that's the way I would describe it. So if free people are not subject to the coercion of other people, that means they're not subject to either force or threats of force imposed upon them, whether by your neighbors or by the state. Mm-hmm. And that is the state of being free. And so the first article there is an expression of that definition. If free means not being subject to the force or threat of force from other people, well, then that's the first rule.
I love it.
Right? So we start there, and of course, there's going to be complications, but we'll start with that. The first rule is that everybody has essentially, well, let's put it in the other way. It's expressed as a prohibition. No one can impose force or threats of force on anyone else. And that prohibition includes everybody. It includes individual people, and it includes the state.
It includes the state. That's
right.
That's the best part. The American Constitution doesn't even go there.
That's correct. So the model or the paradigm of the U.S. Constitution, I like to describe as the checks and balances model.
Yeah.
Right. You have three distinct branches. They're designed to check and balance each other so that there's no concentration of power anywhere. And for a good while, it worked very well. It's the gold standard so far.
Yeah.
But it's run into a lot of trouble now, and the people who are inside the power of the state have found the gaps and the ways around the mechanisms that are supposed to protect the people from the tyranny of the state. So, exactly. For my money, although it's the place to start in thinking about what constitutions have worked, it doesn't seem to be working very well, and we have to go further to make sure that the people who are in the country are actually free from being pushed around by the people with authority. So you start with that definition and prohibition, no force. And then you say, okay, well, it's all very well, but how are you going to enforce the rule?
Yeah.
So let's say, somebody comes along and comes at you with a bat, or steals your car, or invades your home. And we have this rule that the state cannot use force. Well, we want the state to be able to enforce that rule.
Yes.
Right? And so that brings us to our exception to the rule, right? The state can, in fact, use force to apply and prosecute, to enforce that rule. Because if that wasn't the case, there would be no rule.
That's right.
And that's the meaning of a law.
That's the meaning of it. I love it.
Right? But here's the implication, though. If that's the exception, that the state can use force to enforce that rule, that means it can't have any other laws that are enforced with the violence of the state.
Which is a libertarian's wet dream. Because yes. Now you right there, you make it so that the administrative state cannot basically administrate you out of your freedom. That's correct. That's correct. The fundamental problem with the United States Constitution. The Constitution itself is, all it really is an idea at this point, because the administrative state, as per Washington, D.C., that square area that even has its own sets of rules, yes, has gotten so big that they have just found endless ways around you getting a remedy from the Constitution, because it's an ocean of statutes and ordinances. Correct. And that's because
the US Constitution and certainly the Canadian Constitution essentially gives the state an unlimited jurisdiction, right? Now, I'm not talking about the federal government versus the states or the provinces.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about this branch or that branch. I mean the state as a whole, like the whole thing.
Yeah.
All the legislatures, all the executive branches, both federally and state or provincially, the courts, all of the bits of the state together. The Constitution in both countries essentially give to that huge entity an unlimited jurisdiction to provide for the general welfare, for the common good, for the public interest. Now, there's a provision in the U.S. Constitution that says, reserved to the people. But that's more apparent than real. That's not actually true. I mean, the individual people are not able to go to the state and say, hey, this provision says the power is reserved to us. That's not what they mean. They mean it's a democratic country.
Yeah.
But that's no real protection. So in essence, both of these constitutions give to the state an unlimited jurisdiction, complete power. And I've been describing this as the default. This is the default architecture of these constitutions. The state is all powerful, unlimited power to do anything they want, except, right? This is the architecture, all powerful, except, and the exceptions, of course, for example, are the rights in the Bill of Rights or in the Charter. Okay, so what those rights are doing, or claiming to do, is carving out exceptions to the all-powerful state, the unlimited jurisdiction of the state to do anything it wants. Okay? Which is why you need a Bill of Rights or a Charter, because without them, the legislature, for example, can legislate anything, like literally anything.
Yep.
Maybe a couple of exceptions, in this country reserved for, the powers of the crown and so on, but and potentially, rights in the unwritten constitution. But essentially, the architecture is unlimited, except, and the exceptions are the rights that you can find in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay? That structure doesn't work.
Well, and a lot of the reason it doesn't work is because the judiciary has become so corrupt. And it's a big part of what I love about what you've put in your constitution is this idea of two judges. I don't want to sidetrack you because I like where you're going, but there's just so many problems that you've addressed at the foundational level in this.
Right. Well, and you've identified a big one, and I can go there now if you like. Let's just put it this way: every written constitution has an Achilles heel. And that is that they are written in words. And words require interpretation.
Yeah.
And the courts are the ones with the power to do that interpretation. And so we are all subject to the power of the courts to tell us what the Constitution means. Right? And the paradox, if you like, is that the courts are there as guardians to protect, our rights against the state.
Allegedly.
But the courts are themselves part of the state.
And they, of course,
right?
have their own self-interest.
Of course.
As do the judges.
Of course.
Every administrator.
Of course. And this is what has happened to the checks and balances model, right? So most distinct in the US model, you have legislature, you have executive, headed by the president at the federal level, and you have the courts, independent branch, right? They're supposed to check and balance each other. And, on occasion they do. It's not like they agree about everything. They certainly do not.
Yeah.
But they have skirmishes. In the big picture of things, they are all very much on the same page, especially in Canada.
Yeah,
where the courts have basically...
Doesn't matter who you vote for, the government always wins.
Well, this is the thing. The government doesn't always win, but in the big picture sense, here's what they agree about, and the courts especially so. All three branches, especially in Canada, legislature, executive, and courts agree that we must have a managerial state.
Yeah.
That the government is there to administer society so that it works and protects everybody from the activities of everybody else. Okay? On that, there is no disagreement. And in that sense, the courts are not a check or a balance on the project of expanding the state's reach in all different kinds of ways over a period of time.
Yeah.
So, well, I can get back to the courts and how to deal with them,
Yes.
because the implication of having a charter of rights, as we do in this country, is to give the courts the final say, at least with respect to the meaning of the rights, on what the Constitution means. I mean, I put it this way in the past. I've said, if the charter was honest, it would say something like, everybody has the right to the rights and freedoms that courts decide from time to time that they ought to have. Because the meaning of the rights is completely within the control of the Supreme Court of Canada and the courts below it. Mm-hmm. Right? So everybody thinks that we're ruled by the Constitution. That is actually not literally true. We are ruled by the courts.
Well, the Constitution's a piece of paper with words.
Correct.
So it doesn't
right.
do the ruling, right? It doesn't make decisions. It's an inanimate object.
Yes.
So it has to come to the judges and the courts. The big
Right.
problem is kind of in what you touched on, kind of going looking at old constitutions is, when you think about the history of law and the way it's gone, we had, Canada has three traditions of law, right? We have the common law tradition out of the Magna
Yep.
Carta. We have the courts of equity, the chancery, the principles that came out of that, because that was too rigid to say everything was done this way, must be done this way. That came equity. Then we have, statute, civil law. Is that it's created this scenario where everything is interpretive, because everything is there's always a world of possibilities. So you can write a law, but did you consider this or you consider this? This is why the piles of paper only ever get bigger, right? Because the idiot who screwed something up and now a new law has to be created for him creates precedent, and then you stack it on. And this is what I love about what you've done, is that the idea of two judges is so interesting. I've never heard it before. I don't know. I don't want to derail you, but just I get excited about these kinds of ideas.
Right. So let's go there next. But let's just say this. So there's a I guess an instinct on the part of people when they're imagining, what the Constitution has to say to fix the situation that we're in, to try and craft a document that says or reflects the feelings that they have, the sentiments that they want. It's like a moral document, a statement of, how the government should behave.
Yeah.
And contains, some kinds of rules or rights in them, and especially rights, because, the inclination, quite understandably, is, well, we ran into this problem during COVID or this problem during this situation. We need to add these rights, right to this and right to that and right to this, and you end up with these big, long lists of rights.
It goes forever because everybody wants to chime in and they want to add their 2 cents.
Right. And to your point, though, you can never write a document long enough that it covers all the possibilities, all the situations. Yeah. You are still subject to the interpretation of the other bodies that have power, right? And so that's, the real trick in designing a constitution is to try to limit the power of the people who have control of the way the Constitution is going to work. So, if you like,
yes, a
constitution has to answer 2 different kinds of questions. The what question, as in, what are the rules? But also the who question, like who gets to decide this? Who has the power? And to what extent? And for how long? And in what combination? Right? And those 2 questions are both important, and the attention most of the time is on the what. Everybody wants to talk about the what. What are the rules? What are the rights? That is not enough. Because as soon as you set the system up, like if you have the situation we have now, all those what answers don't matter. We now have a charter that means something different than what the people who wrote it meant. Mm-hmm. Right? that means it doesn't work because you gave the power away. So we've got to design something that keeps the power limited, and we have to keep going back. We should have to keep going back to the document. Even though it's just a document, I take your point. It's 100% correct. It's just a piece of paper, but it's the alternative, if it's structured properly and described properly, to handing over the control to a particular group of people. So let's go to the courts. The court system under this Constitution is designed so that the courts are able to resolve disputes. After all, that's why you have a court system. You got to have a court system, otherwise you have lawlessness. Yeah. And you have people, committing acts against each other in retribution, and that's the kind of situation that you don't want. However, you also don't want concentrated power in the courts. Right now, what we have essentially is a star chamber in the Supreme Court of Canada. You have judges who are appointed by the Prime Minister, sit until age 75. Sometimes that's decades. They are answerable to no one. They are not elected. They are not accountable. They can't be appealed. They can do what they want.
It's an inner circle of elites that hang out with each other, and it's just nepotism over and over again.
Sure, yes, and it's no coincidence, I think, that in the broad sense, they tend, and of course there are exceptions, I don't want to overstate this, but in the broad sense, those elites are mostly on the same page on the big questions. In Canada, we like to, praise ourselves in so many ways compared to the Americans. And one of the ways is we say, well, the U.S. Supreme Court is so politicized, and ours is not. We're not political here. We just do the job of judging. That's baloney. Totally. Absolute baloney. What they have in the U.S. is a more transparent conflict between two different kinds of ways of thinking. And we don't have that conflict in Canada. We don't have that struggle that's going on in the US, because in Canada, the struggle has been won already by one of the sides. It's not that the Canadian Supreme Court is not political. It's just that it's only one politics. It's only one set of politics that drives the place and has become ascendant. Yeah. So this is a false advantage that does not actually exist. We'd be much better off with the American situation where they're at least having a battle. And we don't have that in Canada. So how do you create a court system that does not concentrate power in a small group of people to dictate to the country, what kinds of rights you're going to have, what kind of powers the government's going to have over you? And what I've suggested is that you have basically a court system that consists of two courts, a trial court and an appeal court. In the trial court, every bench consists of two judges. And the outcome, if you're being prosecuted for a crime, or if you're involved in a civil suit, in order for the prosecution to win or for the plaintiff to win, both of these judges must agree. And if it's a split decision, then the accused is not guilty and the defendant is not liable. Okay, that's the trial level. The appeal level, you have benches of three. And in order for an appeal to succeed from the trial level, all three judges must agree. If they don't, the appeal fails.
It's like the original idea of a hung jury in a way, I guess.
In a way, correct. That's right. Yes. Now that's not enough of it by itself, because if you had that structure, it would help, but you'd still have powerful people sitting on the bench for a long period of time, unaccountable, unelected, answerable to no one. So that brings me to the principle of establishing what I like to call an amateur government, and that includes the judges. By amateur, I mean temporary. So right now we are dominated by an elite, as you described, a professional ruling class in the courts, politicians who have, careers,
Privy
bureaucrats
Council.
who are embedded in the state, people who are around forever,
Mm-hmm.
a whole set of vested interests who are careerists. And one of the things that I think we have to do is to get rid of that model.
Yeah.
No careers in the public service, not as a judge, not as a politician, not as a bureaucrat, not as an ambassador, not as a supplier, not as a consultant. Right? You want to clear that out and create an amateur government where people are coming in, doing a job, and then getting out. And you could pick any period of time that you wanted, but I in the piece that you saw, I picked 6 years. So 2 terms of 3. You could pick 8 years, 2 terms of 4, which would be fine, as long as it's short enough so that people don't get embedded in it and get vested interests and are able to look after their own interests without regard to the public interest.
Exactly.
And while we're at it, we're going to provide that everybody who works in the public service, courts, politicians, bureaucrats, as the case may be, gets paid the national median wage, the middle wage.
Which I love, because you, in a way, you flipped socialism on the socialists.
Yes, yes.
You socialized the wage of the government, thereby making it not this big career thing that people want to do, because, like you said, career politicians, where it's this sexy job. It's not sexy. It's utilitarian.
Yes, right.
It's got to be
Right.
a good enough wage that somebody's going to want to do it, right? Because you can't make it like jury duty, where people, I'm not going to make up excuses to not do it.
Right.
To make it appealing enough. And I don't think you said anything out there about it. This is all negotiable, right? But that's so fundamental to it, is that it makes it so that people aren't sitting there. You don't want a child dreaming about being a politician their entire life.
What do you want your best and brightest people to be doing? And the answer is doing whatever they do in the private sector.
Yes, making
Right?
things.
You do not. The aspiration is not to attract the best and the brightest to spend their lives in the government. We don't want that. We want them outside doing productive things.
Yep.
And that's my response to those people who say, well, yeah, but if you do it that way, you won't get the best people. Well, you'll get the best people for a small period of time. They'll come in and say, look, you know what? I'm going to do public service. I'm going to sit on the bench
Yep.
for 4 years or 8 years. And then when I'm done, I'm going to go back to my practice.
You don't really need the best people.
You don't. Most of the time, you do
Because
not need the best people.
Government doesn't make things. Individuals
That's right.
make things.
That's right.
People
That's right.
make things. Government, as it's so brilliant about this Constitution, is you go back to number 1, it always kind of takes you back there, because you go, this is the purpose.
Yes.
Purpose isn't to create a utopia.
Right.
That is up to individuals and the free market to do that.
That is correct.
Just to manage things so people don't kill each other.
That is 100% correct. All you're trying to do is design a framework so that people are restrained from interfering with other people. That is all.
It's like the referee
And then
in an NHL game.
Exactly.
The
He's
referee,
a referee
isn't the
in an
all-star
NHL game.
in the hockey game. The players are.
That is a beautiful metaphor. Yes.
Just
Correct.
for the Canadians listening.
That's right. That's right. Right. All right, and that's the basic architecture, and there are more things to it. But so let me just add, while we're on the judges, before we leave that, the judges are elected like everybody else, like the politicians, and they serve for this limited period of time. Let's call it 6 or 8 years, and then when they're done, they leave. And this, people call this term limits, and they are term limits, but they're not term limits in the ordinary sense, because when people imagine term limits, they often think of, for example, the US president, 2 terms of 4 years. Okay, probably a good idea. But this is not just that. It's an 8, let's use 8 years. It's an 8-year time limit within which you can work for the state in any capacity cumulatively. Okay? If you want to spend 8 years as a politician, great. But if you do, you can't then become an ambassador or a judge. You're done.
Or
8
I
years.
like how you put consultant in there as well.
Sure. If you're working for the state, I mean, this is one of the ways that they'll get around it, right? So, well, you can't be an employee for longer than 8 years, but I'm not an employee, I'm an independent contractor. Well, no. That's included. If you are working with the state, for the state in any capacity, including a consultant, including a supplier. Let's say you supply the paper
Yep.
for the offices.
Yep.
8 years,
Yep.
then you're done. And that means you cannot thereafter run for office.
Yep.
Okay. So in other words, working with and working for the state is not the plum assignment. It's not a way to get rich. And it's a temporary thing, get used to it. Everybody's going to have to figure out how to make their way outside of government, in the private sector, in the entrepreneurial world, in the free world that we're creating, where people will figure out what the best kind of society to have is.
Yeah, it's incredible. Now, for people who are just, I've read it all, but for people who are just tuning in, maybe talk about some things about what do you do about democracy?
Yes.
In the sense, because democracy for us libertarians and free market people is always problematic, right?
Yes.
It's what all the old school, anarcho-capitalist guys talked about, is that the problem with democracy is that people keep voting for their own self-interest.
Yes.
And then politicians pander to them.
Yep.
And then that group gets a hold of the state. And then that's where we get into the diminishing, slide towards fascism and totalitarianism or communism, all the same thing, really, because
Right.
we keep getting there. So what do you say to that?
Right. Good question. I've put it this way. There are two ways. Well, there's more than two ways, but in our context, there are two ways not to be free. One is to be ruled by a bunch of elites, and the other way is to be ruled by the mob. And democracy is the mob.
Democracy is the mob, yeah.
Right? And those two things are not mutually exclusive. I mean, the mob empowers the elites and so on, as you were describing. Okay? But you do not want either of those two things, because either of those two things means you're not free, because either or both of those groups will have the power to tell you what to do. That's the danger in democracy. Right? So some people say, to get out of our situation that we're, the bad monolithic managerial state that we have to establish things like, direct democracy, rule by referendum. All important questions should be put to the people.
Yeah.
And the people will decide, what the law is going to be.
It's a horrible idea, because
Terrible idea.
People are ignorant to issues, right?
Terrible idea. But also the people. So here's my favorite example. So imagine that we had that system in place during COVID.
But a nightmare.
Terrible. So if the proposition on the table was everybody must get a vaccine, that we'll put that to a referendum. If 75% of the people said, yeah, everybody gets a vaccine, well then, God damn it, everybody will get a vaccine or be in prison.
Yeah.
Okay? That means you have no rights.
Yeah.
Right? So that won't do. It just will not do.
In a way, you kind of address that in Article 1.
Yes, correct. That's correct. Article 1 means that it doesn't matter what the mob wants. It can't endorse, create, insist upon laws implied with force that have nothing to do with the use of force.
That's why it's so powerful, because you essentially neuter the state right out of the gate.
Right.
And so
Correct.
what we have here is sort of like politics versus law.
Right.
This is law.
That's correct.
There's no politics in this whatsoever.
There is no politics. So exactly.
Law.
And the state you end up with is relatively powerless. Like, it's not making policy about stuff. No. It's not making rules about, wearing bike helmets when you ride your bike down the street. It can't do that. It's prohibited from making those rules.
In a way, I mean, okay, so if we were to and I do want to go to next, how do we get here? But it's almost like this eliminates political parties in a way.
It
at least eliminates the incentive to do anything, because what's the political party going to do if Article 1 prevents them from coercing the other group.
Exactly. There's no treasure to be had by
Yes.
being a party and having control, because you don't have very much to do. All the incentives are flipped.
Yeah.
You now have an incentive to be successful in the private sector, and there's very little incentive to try to be a powerful player inside the state, because there aren't any powerful players inside the state. You sit around in the legislature thinking, well, what are we going to do today?
Which is perfect.
Yes. Right.
It's perfect because it becomes, I love it because it really is a libertarian's wet dream because it makes the state like a janitor. No offense against janitors, but it makes the job of serving the state super. It's like, well, yeah, I don't know, maybe I'll do that. And what might happen as a result, I could see, is that it would almost create, I think for the judges, for example, where a young person probably wouldn't want to do it. And just because you think, well, because where are you going to go with that? You're a young man in your 20s and you're thinking of the future and where you want to go. To spend 4 to 8 years or 6 or whatever it is in there is not that can really slow your progression down. So to me, when I think about how this could be applied and how it would pan out, is that it would make it so people who are maybe semi-retired might want to be a judge, which wouldn't be a bad thing. Because
No.
look at some of the judges today. Even look at some of the judges that got into the Supreme Court in the United States. These leftist, indoctrinated, incredibly totalitarian-minded type people get in there.
Yep.
And they think, oh, I've got a career. I'm rubbing shoulders with Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all these kinds of people. But now it kind of creates it where somebody's been in business, they've had a family, they've done a lot of things. Generally speaking, people gain more wisdom if they're doing it right as they get older. So you might have that where the judges are, it's like somebody on the last 8 years of their life. They're healthy enough that they can go to work and do this. This might actually greatly benefit us and kind of bring the idea of elders back into our society.
Interesting. Sure. A very interesting way to think about it. That's quite possible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sort of. So I guess where I want to go with this next is, where does the rubber meet the road?
Right.
Because we can't vote in this Constitution. The
No.
architecture of, and maybe you'll speak to this a bit too, because I've heard you speak about this in other podcasts, is that the architecture of the Canadian parliamentary system is fundamentally flawed because of the way the powers balance out.
Yep.
The only way to really get this is do a complete clean slate. Basically, kick everybody out of the buildings. Maybe we'll repurpose the buildings. Kick everybody out and start fresh. So the question there is, how do we get there?
Right. Fair and difficult question. The comparison I like to make is the Americans at the time of the Revolution. They had a moment. Where they had a clean slate. And they were very fortunate to have a bunch of people, representatives of the various 13 colonies, who were together in a room to hash out how they were going to govern themselves. And they had to take 2 cracks at it. They got the first one kind of wrong, and they had to trash it and do it again. But they had that moment, the opportunity to create something that was different from what they knew, which is ironic in a way, because the revolutionaries' first complaint was that we're not being treated as proper Englishmen. Like the king was not treating them as Englishmen with the full rights and status of English men. But that situation gave them the opportunity to think from scratch and create something new. And they created an architecture that was radically different from what they'd come from. And they got fortunate. And there's going to be some luck in this. We have to be fortunate enough the stars have to align, especially in the case of Alberta. Let's say Alberta succeeds in having a referendum and passing a referendum and entering into negotiations with the rest of Canada. But you're going to need the stars to align. You're going to need the right people in the room. You're going to need the right sort of coming together of ideas. And my hope is this: there are enough Albertans who are expressing the sentiment that they want to be free. Now, of course, the question is, well, what do they mean?
Yeah.
And some of them will just mean free from Ottawa.
Yeah.
But that's not free.
No, and this is kind of where you get into the fake Wexit movement.
Yes.
At least that's what I kind of call it.
Yes.
It's kind of
yes.
fake
yes.
if it's led by, say, Daniel Smith, and it's almost like asking permission opposed to a proclamation or a declaration.
Yes. Well, so the situation that the Americans were in and the situation that Alberta is in, of course, are very different as well in many ways. And one of them is that it just so happens that in this country we happen to have a path to independence, which the Americans did not have. I mean, it was outrageous at the time, and the king promised to hang them all.
Yeah.
In this country, because of the Quebec experience, we actually have a path. We have a Supreme Court decision that describes the steps, not in great detail, but the steps required to establish a province as an independent country. And so, Alberta may as well follow those steps. And why not? It's a peaceful way to establish your project.
You're not referring to the Statute of Westminster or what?
Oh, no. I'm talking about the 1988 Supreme Court decision about the secession of Quebec.
Okay. Specifically to Quebec, yeah.
Yes, Quebec. And it all arose because of Quebec.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court in this decision basically said, look, if a province holds a referendum on a clear question, that is a question that's clearly about leaving the country, no ifs, ands, or buts, it's either one thing or the other thing, and if a clear majority of the people support it, vote in favor of it, then that province, they meant Quebec, but any province, has a mandate to negotiate its departure with the rest of Canada, and the rest of Canada has a mandate to negotiate for the same result. It does not give either side the right to unilaterally either leave or refuse to accept the departure, but you enter into a political negotiation, and it is a political one. The court emphasized it's a political negotiation, not a legal one. In other words, don't come running back to the court if it doesn't go the way you want.
Right.
It's a political negotiation, and at that stage, that's all we've got. So after that, who knows?
Okay. Are you familiar with the Walter Cool letter to René Lévesque in '76?
I vaguely, but tell us about it.
He's the backbencher that basically said, well, as per the Statute of Westminster, the Dominion of Canada was officially absolved, and what we've been doing for the last 50 so years has been just holding on to the administration, and nobody's really talking about the fact that the Dominion, as per the BNA and all of that, was closed. Because it's an interest. People like myself who I'm a nerd. Like I'm one of these guys that got into conspiracy theories, and then I started reading Canadian law. As boring as that sounds, it's actually incredibly interesting. A lot of the weird things that happened in Canada, like how Article 59 of the 1982 Charter was never ratified, which says until Quebec. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah.
Until Quebec allows their, these weird things. Sure. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to what judges are going to do, right? Like we said at the beginning, you can have a piece of paper.
Yeah.
But it's an inanimate object.
Yes.
It cannot enforce laws. It all comes down to human beings doing these things. And so
That's correct.
Okay, I was just curious as on a side.
Yeah, no, the law is what the Supreme Court says that it is.
Yeah.
And if the Supreme Court says we have a constitution in a country, then we have a constitution in a country. It's all a measure of legitimacy. If everybody regards this as legitimate, then that's the way it's going to be, because the courts control the violence of the state.
Yeah,
because what the courts order, the executive branch does.
that's right.
And as long as that happens, then that's the mechanism by which the state maintains control, right? So, and I've heard about this Statute of Westminster theory. I've had to look through that statute. I don't think that's what it says. Even if you were inclined to ignore what the courts say,
You're right.
I just
Yeah.
don't think that that statute says those things anyway. But
Well, you
but
know,
in any event,
it's a whole rabbit hole, and
yeah,
like
yeah,
we've kind of both agree that it doesn't matter.
right,
Even if it says what I kind of posed, and I'm not really posing it,
right,
it doesn't matter because who's going to enforce it?
right,
Who cares, right?
right.
So I wonder if it gets. So the thing that's I find so exciting about where this is going is there's all these problems in Canada now where people have had enough. You know, basically starting from the COVID show,
Yeah,
people are just seeing government get worse and worse and worse, and now it's almost epitomized in what's been going on in my home province of British Columbia with
yes,
this Aboriginal title, because now people are kind of being having their feet to the fire because it's
right.
did you see how they want to go after the Ottawa Valley now?
Oh, sure. And it's
Now
not just
there's
the
a
Ottawa
land
Valley.
claim on the Ottawa
Yeah, yeah,
Valley, which is
yeah.
perfect, right? Because now
It is
the Liberals
perfect.
can get
Yes,
a taste of their own medicine, just sort of
sure.
like how the example I use is the left always vote for open borders. Meanwhile, they all live in gated white communities, right?
Right.
So rules for thee and not for me. You can
Yep.
live in the trenches of diversity, but we're going to live in our little sheltered community. And so, how perfect is it that it's
Right.
coming for them now? But I wonder if when it comes to execution of this, if it
Yep.
literally comes down to it's as simple as individuals who get a copy of the let's say it starts with 500 people or 5,000 people that say we like Bruce Party's Constitution. I wonder if
Mhm.
it comes down to people in geographical areas literally knocking on doors in their area and saying, would you agree to this? Because a constitution is more or less an MOU. It's just
Yes,
an
it is.
agreement. It's
Yes.
no different than a company agreement that's saying, we're going to do this. These are the rules of engagement.
Yep.
And it governs these people. So
Yep.
we could literally have a door-to-door campaign where we start in maybe a hotbed of Alberta that there's a lot of interest in, and people go and start knocking on doors.
Yes. 100%. It's going to have to be something like that. It's going to have to be a critical mass of people who say, this is the kind of thing that we want.
People have to put skin in the game because if they don't, there's no magic politician that's
Nope.
going to pull it off because your constitution actually limits that from happening.
Exactly. And here's the danger, of course. The danger is that in the event that Alberta succeeds in getting away, and I certainly hope that they do, that they will end up with something that looks an awful lot like what they have now in Canada. In other words, the danger is that Alberta will make itself into a little Canada.
Yeah.
And it'll be free from Ottawa, but it will not be free. It will not be free. It will not be free from the managerial state that they already have right now in Alberta. Right? They will be ruled by Albertans alone and not by Albertans and Ottawa. Okay. Okay, but why bother? You're just trading, one set of masters for the other. Your system is the same. Your architecture is the same. You're still not free people. You're still being told what to do. You still have a planned economy. You still have regulation coming out, the yin yang. It's like, what have you done? You haven't really accomplished very much.
Yeah, and and with that, so there's other elements of the power structure that I'd like to get your take on,
Sure.
because you didn't say too much about it in the Constitution, but when it comes to say the power of the central bank,
Yes.
so the Bank of Canada was
Yes.
changed uh, from the 1974 Bank Act that changed. Canada used to just spend money into existence and put it into the economy, and we dealt with a reasonable amount of inflation as that would cause, but it was manageable. then Trudeau Sr. got in there and changed the game, and now we're
Yep.
paying interest, and now it comes income tax and all these other things. In your ideal state, how would a government manage its economy at a because you can kind of make the case that a government needs to have a bank, wouldn't you agree? Or do you
I'm
think
not sure
that
that
could
I
be
do.
completely free market?
I completely free market. I wouldn't have a central bank.
No central bank.
No central bank. I don't want a central bank to be trying to manage the interest rate, the inflation rate. Like, why do you
Well,
want?
the reason I
Yeah,
would say why
yeah,
is there's a lot of things to change to get to where we want to be. So, say, for example,
yep,
look at immigration over the last 10 years.
yep,
It's gone like this.
yep.
We have a problem. And not that I have a problem with immigrants or a problem with people from other countries, but we do have a problem as per what we talked about at the beginning, in that if you get a bunch of communists into a libertarian country and they want communism, what are you going to do? So we have a problem where if we could pull this off,
Mhm.
there's a lot of people who just got here that might not need to stay. There might be, I'm a free market guy, but at the same time, I recognize that some cultures don't mix. And when they become a majority, how are we going to have the state we want? Let's say it's not the case of Sharia law in Alberta, but let's just say that it is.
Yep,
If the majority wants Sharia law, we're never going to get
yep.
this constitution. So the reason for a central bank might be to say, how are we going to get all these people home without deploying resources?
Well, I don't understand what role the central bank would play in that, though.
Because they could print the money to pay for the people to go home. Otherwise,
Oh,
we're going to the free market and saying, hey, would you guys give us money to send all of these temporary foreign workers who don't want to leave home?
oh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure we'd do that. I'm not sure why it would be the job of the state to fund that. I mean, so let's say you are in a country you don't belong in. You know, you take a plane and you land somewhere and you decide you're just going to stay. And you have no visa, you have no permission, you have no passport, you just decide to stay. And the government, discovers you, finds out you've overstayed your visitor's welcome, and says you have to leave. Okay. Now, is that government responsible for paying your flight out? I don't think so.
No, that's true. But would there not be associated costs in what if somebody says, I can't afford to go?
Listen, people cannot afford to do lots of things
Yeah.
that they're going to ask the state to fund. And this is really the point. One thing that we have to get used to is the idea that the state is not there to do this kind of thing.
Mhm.
The state is there to keep the peace. And otherwise, you're on your own, buddy.
Okay, well then
You-
here's a follow-up question to that. Okay.
yeah.
I'm just thinking of scenarios, right? On
Right.
how
Of course. And this is exactly the kind of exercise that we all need to go through.
we do.
Exactly this.
We do, because
Yes.
if we want to
Yes.
actually pull this off, and I do,
Yes.
we have to think about these future scenarios. So
Yes.
what do we do then as far as there's a bunch of like who gets to decide, for example? So let's say it goes down to you and I, and we put together an advocacy group of say 5,000 people, and we start in some part of Alberta, and maybe we start in a part of BC, or maybe a bunch of people in Canada start in their. I want to do it out here. I mean, the beautiful thing about living rurally is I only have 10 neighbors, in a multi-kilometer area, so I only have to knock on 10 doors, and it's
Right.
it's, it's a large geographical area.
Right.
But how do we decide if there's a bunch of, say, people as the whole thing's falling apart? Because you could make the case that during the transition, there might be these periods of chaos where there's uncertainty, right? And
Yes.
people that are here that aren't supposed to be here, do they get to decide? Like, how do we decide who has consensus?
Right.
Who
And
participates in
well,
consensus?
it's a good question. And let's just observe this. This scenario that you're describing is one of the reasons that if this is ever going to happen, it has to happen soon, because you're going to miss the window otherwise. Or otherwise, you're going to have more people in whatever jurisdiction we're talking about. We're talking about Alberta, but it could be anywhere. You're going to have more people eventually in Alberta who have vested interests in not having the kind of system that we're talking about right now,
Well, that's it.
right?
Yes.
And so the window is
It's shrinking.
closing.
Yeah.
It's shrinking
Yeah.
all the time. And if it takes very much longer, it won't be there.
And I wonder if this is where what we need to do is focus on small successes. Instead of saying Alberta is going to achieve self-determination, we
Yeah.
say, this area between Red Deer or something like that, and people start to do it in pockets to say, let's amalgamate geographical positions, almost like a game of Risk.
Well, perhaps, except that the one challenge in that is that it doesn't make use of the advantage of the opportunity that has been presented by the Quebec experience. I mean, it just so happens that we have a path for a province to say, we're out of here. Like most countries don't have anything like this. There's
But
no
is that
provision.
process not dependent on Supreme Court judges?
Oh, well, it is, and the danger, of course, is that the new Supreme Court will change the goalposts for
Well, because
Alberta compared to.
that's where I'm getting, is that
It's
if
quite
we're
possible,
just relying on a
right?
political process,
Right, but
we're now
we
getting
have
into the same problem that Article 1 of your Constitution is trying to prevent.
no question, no question. But we at least have this advantage going for us right now. There is at least legitimacy in the project because it was seen to be legitimate before, right? It was legitimate for Quebec to try to leave. It was legitimate for Quebec to have a referendum. If Alberta goes down the same path, it's just difficult for the usual suspects to say, well, it's fine for Quebec, but you can't do that, right? That doesn't guarantee anything in terms of the outcome. But you have a starting point that you would otherwise not have. Imagine that there was no Quebec thing happened ever, and there's no Supreme Court of Canada judgment, and a province just out of the blue said, you know what, we want to go. I mean, the reaction would be very different, as in, you bunch of traitors were sending in the troops.
Yeah.
Right. And so what we have in just happenstance is we have the beginning of a process wherein a province can go, but there is no provision for any kind of other unit to do the same thing. So if you gather together a small bunch of villages who together said, you know what, we want to have our own place, and we are going to join together, and we're going to have our own local government, and we're going to tell the government of Alberta that we're out of here. Okay, a much more difficult case to make.
Well, it almost seems though the biggest problem is going to be the urban centers, because as
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
urban centers by their nature are always more left wing, because when you live in a concentrated area, as I like to say, where the money flows, the policy goes.
Yes.
So
That's right.
there's
Yeah.
always an incentive for more government in cities because you need infrastructure to manage and get by. Therefore, people vote and demand more stuff from the administrative state. So
Yes.
how can Alberta look at the mayors in the past, in recent years, of Calgary and Edmonton? Those are by far the largest population centers of Alberta. How are they? I think about people in the country. I think about areas like Coaldale and small areas outside of these Calgary and Edmonton, where there's real salt of the earth farmers, homesteaders, you name it, ranchers.
Yep.
They would be all in. But
Yeah.
people in the cities of population centers, I don't know if they would be.
Oh, I suspect the majority of those city dwellers would be against it for the very reason that you're describing. And of course, plus there's a much greater percentage of those people in the cities who are directly dependent upon having the kind of government that we have in order to maintain themselves, because they're either employees or they're welfare recipients or they're university professors who are paid by the public purse, or a whole host of people who depend upon a socialized system of governance to maintain their status and success on their own terms. So yeah, no doubt about it. It's going to be a struggle to win a referendum, partly because of Calgary and Edmonton in
I just
Alberta.
wonder if we just have to draw lines. I mean, all borders are as imaginary lines.
That's true. And
Draw
if
a
you can
line.
get,
It's this
if you,
because it comes to the whole thing of the rural-urban divide, right?
yes,
This became very obvious to a lot of people during COVID because you
yep,
saw
yep,
where people's variance in opinions came. Was
sure,
people in the country generally are more libertarian and free market because I plow my 1 kilometer driveway, right?
right,
I
right,
have my own septic system. I
yep,
grow my own
yes,
food.
yep,
I'm already used to taking care of myself. Thereby, I prefer a free market. That's the life I've chosen. Yes, it requires more responsibility and more work, but it's a valuable trade-off for me. Whereas people in the city are the opposite, and so this
yep,
comes down to this eternal problem that we're facing everywhere in the Western world. Is the cities want leftism, they want more government, and the country wants less.
right, right. I grant you, this is going to be a problem. It's going to be a battle. And the people who are in favor of this should understand, I think, that whatever the process is, this is nothing less than a political revolution. The people who are against it will not take it sitting down.
No.
And they will try to use legitimate means first, and then maybe not so legitimate means second, to try and undermine it. And so the people who are determined to do this have got to be determined to do this in spite of the fact that there were going to be serious roadblocks put in your way. I mean, this really hasn't even started yet,
No, not
this
even
this
close.
battle, right?
This is where I just keep going back to the central bank thing in the sense that regarding the military, I mean,
Yeah,
this is I've heard Friedman talk about old Milton Friedman talks on Donahue and stuff from the '80s when he would talk about
right,
things, and he would often concede and say, well, when it comes to a military, the problem with the free market is then now you have a market incentive to have a military, but who funds the military if there's a legitimate international threat to a nation state of people in an area? How this is where I hate central banks. Like my dad red pilled me to the Federal Reserve and the whole boondoggle of that 26
yep,
years ago, and it's been the front of my mind ever since.
right,
How is it fair that this small group of people get the authority to print money and they first enrich themselves and then give us the interest and we
yep,
service that debt? But the original model of Canada as a central bank wasn't all that bad. Was it perfect? No, but how did we build the railroad across the country? Right? They didn't go out and raise money for it. They printed currency units.
right, right. Except that you're you're sort of alluding to one of the ways to view Canadian history, and that is to say that that it's possible that Canada has always been a kind of grift from the very beginning, right? In the sense that the reason for the existence of the country at all is to resist the expansion of the Americans into British territory,
It's a
and
core
that in
part of
order
Canadian identity, right? Isn't it?
exactly, and
That we're not
in
American.
order to incentivize these Canadians to stick with the crown, the king, we're gonna pay them off. And the same thing with the federal government and the provinces. The you can make the case, and my Energy Pro colleagues have, especially my Energy Pro colleague Lawrence Solomon has made this case that really, Canada was a project of the coming together of various regions and provinces for the payoffs from the federal government. I mean, you mentioned the railway. I mean, the railway was a bribe to BC. You join the country, and we'll build you a railway. How about that? It's a quid pro quo,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
That is not joining, a vision of a grand country. This is a dollars and cents transaction,
Right.
and in a sense, if you accept that version of the Canadian story, I mean, it's still that and more in spades. It's the
Yeah.
country is a grift.
I see where you're going, but it is interesting even to be devil's advocate for myself because I'm not saying that's a position of mine. I'm just thinking about scenarios.
Sure, yeah,
There are examples. I grew up in Kelowna, BC, And
Yep.
there are examples of the original Kettle Valley Trail. Locals raised money to build it. So there are free market because it's like the libertarian meme. It's like ma roads, right? Who's going to build the roads, right?
Right. Yeah.
You talk
Yep.
to a leftist.
Yep.
But there are examples. I mean, the free market builds the roads anyways because it's all independent contractors. They just get money from the government to do it, right?
Right.
So it's not that roads cannot be built without without central government. It's just, yeah, as I say, the devil's in the details when it comes to these things, and there's still a long road to figure all of this out, as you
Of
know.
course. Of course. And there's going to be a lot of difficulties along the way. No doubt about it. But but those difficulties, I think, can be overcome as long as as long as the central proposition is absorbed and embraced. If you don't have that, if you don't have the vision of what it is you're trying to do, then it's going to be knocked off course at the first go.
Yeah.
And there's going to be an awful lot of people in Alberta, even people who are in favor of independence, and generally, in favor of the idea of being free, who are going to be very nervous about leaving the established system of policy and regulation and government and democracy and elections and all those things that they're familiar with. They're gonna want to see that in order to be comforted that what they're going to is something that they recognize. And
Yeah.
and the problem is that if it is something that they recognize, then they haven't escaped. It's still a problem. In order to achieve the thing that we're talking about, you've got to it's got to be different. In order to go where you have never gone, you need to do what you have never done.
Yeah.
And that takes courage.
Huge conversation, Bruce. I think I would love if at another time we could pick this up because I think there's so much stuff here that I want to sit on it again and I want to see what people in my YouTube audience say. And would you come back another time and we could
100%. I'd
circle
love to.
back to
Sure.
this?
Yeah.
Because I think it's so important. And I think, yeah, so, people often, it's kind of like this tall poppy thing. When you put something out there, people just attack you and then they criticize it. And that's okay. That's kind of the free market kind of giving you feedback
Yeah.
because I think this is a long road. I would love to see this happen everywhere. I would love to see, I kind of like the old, I forget who said it. It was like, I don't know if it was one of the original libertarian guys said the best state is the state of the individual. And
Yes.
that's the goal, right? But the
Right.
problem is we can't get there until everybody is in a state of mind where that's even possible. Because that's the problem with the state is that people require it. But it's kind of like Marx's utopia. Well, we don't eventually we won't need a state. We just need the state right now to get us there, and then
Yeah.
we won't need it. It's sort of the anarcho-syndicalist, the Noam Chomsky approach.
Yeah. Well, so the thought that I like to leave people with when they're thinking about these things, because there's an inclination to think, well, is my life easier with the state or without it? A state would be a handy thing to have because it provides us with these services and so on. And I'm sort of this way or that way. It's like, well, let's just understand what the state is, in at least the one that we have right now.
Yeah.
That kind of a model. Okay, we are talking about a mechanism that makes people do things they don't want to do. And all of the services you're talking about are provided by that means, as in they can't be provided without making people do what they don't want to do. In other words, it is a mechanism of violence.
Yeah.
You don't pay taxes without violence.
Yeah.
And taxes are used for all the services that people are fond of.
That's right.
They're based upon violence. I mean, the whole idea is to be free You are free from the violence of other people. And the danger in the state is that you've got groups of people thinking, well, we want to be free, but we also want health care. So we're going to use the state to impose violence upon these people to extract the money for us to get health care, right? So, well, now you're back into using violence for your own purposes.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So it is not an innocent preference. It is a preference to allow the state to use its force to provide you with the policies that you prefer, as opposed to the policies that the other guy prefers. That's all.
I love it. Fantastic. Bruce, where can people find you? I'll have a link to your constitution in the show notes here, but
Great.
where do you suggest people go to follow up with you, listen to your stuff?
Yes, thank you for asking. So all my material is available at rightsprobe.org. That's RIGHTS probe, PROBE.org. I also have a Substack at brucepardy.substack.com, and they can follow me on X at Pardy Bruce.
Fantastic. I'll have all those links in the show notes there as well. Bruce, thanks again for doing this.
Listen, I really appreciate and enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for having me on.
All right, that's my interview with Bruce Pardy. If you guys liked that video, please smash the like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out freedomfarmers.com. That's my platform where I've got dozens of courses, communities. We have a land searching tool called Homestead Accelerator where we can find you really good property like this. We'll do all the legwork and look for the threats and identify the strengths of a property. Also, my live streams are now happening exclusively at freedomfarmers.com. There'll be a link in the show notes for that, a discount if you are interested. And just also a reminder that I'm going to be at Anarchapulco this February. There'll be a link down below. You can get 10% off the VIP and the online ticket if you use my name, Curtis, at the checkout. Again, links in the show notes. See you in the next one.